Chapter 1. Academy Dorm. The boys' eyes were full of hope, and they were shining bright. Sena stood in front of the entrance to the boys' dorm. But it wasn't just any dorm, it was the dorm at the Galaxy Academy. He was confused, though. He tried to wrap his head around the fact that this building in front of him was indeed a dorm. The building was surrounded by a deep, dense forest. He wondered if people really lived here. The building itself was covered with giant ivy-like plants. While many old-school dormitories and school buildings were said to be prestigious, their looks were not necessarily important in determining their prestige. What was most important was the information to be learned inside of them. This place had produced many great minds. Therefore, it was an environment suitable for producing great minds, and therefore, there was no reason to fix what worked. He stepped inside and heard a sound like a railroad crossing warning. Sena sensed danger. A large group of squirrel-like creatures came out of the dormitory forest like a stampede of wild boars. Sena screamed as he was caught up in the stampede and was dragged deep into the forest. They were actually wild animals that were once experimental animals. Whether that meant they were animals used as guinea pigs or the result of genetic experiments was not clear. What was clear was that the exact details of what happened to Sena after he was dragged into the forest were so long and complex that if they were all written out it would take a whole book just to detail them. The main points, however, were that he was passed around from one type of dangerous animal to the next. He ended up in every kind of dangerous forest situation imaginable. A hunter saved him, but the hunter then struck him over the head with his gun. He was actually a poacher. He was told that the experimental animals were protected and the meat was sellable at a high price on the black market. It was said that they were the three major delicacies of the academy. He eventually escaped the poacher and ended up back in front of the dorm. But while he was doing this, his family was back on Earth, in a room on the second floor of their shop home. They were all amazed by something. Hokuto, his father, roamed around the room nervously, occasionally looking out the curtains. His mother told him to calm down. In front of them was a mound of cash stacked high. It was more money than they had ever seen. Hokuto felt like it must have been there because of some sinister and criminal purpose, but it was completely legitimate. It was all the money they had made that day with Sena gone. Sena had been gone for a week, and the condition of the Yamada shop was improving with great momentum. On a daily basis their sales grew, even doubled on occasion. They received large orders, spread out the store by placing goods outside the store that could not be placed in the store. At first they used a simple awning to cover it, but today they added 2 trailers outside full of farm-fresh food and produce. But an increase of customers wasn't the only thing to thank for this. They had received a huge money transfer in Sena's name a few days ago. His father was surprised he had made so much in just a few days. His mom said that it was legit and they didn't have to worry because Kariko confirmed it with her over the phone. His father still worried about his son's bad luck affecting him despite Yoshiko telling him not to worry about it. Earlier, Sito asked Kariko, by means of remote video communication, if she wanted to be in charge of managing Sena's reward money. Kariko said yes. Sito smiled deviously. She clearly had ulterior motives. She said okay, and Kariko quickly opened a new account and told Sito to deposit the funds there. Kariko was stunned at the amount Sito added. Sito calmly smiled behind the screen. Kariko was shocked. Sito asked her to calm down, but she was clearly happy to see Kariko in this condition. Kariko asked if this was a joke. The amount was tens of millions of dollars. Sito said that figure looked a bit small and sent more. Kariko was even more shocked. She froze up. Sito said, "It's a bit small, but my accountants inform me it's all there." She paid out a lot of money. She was glad they had a pool of gold in reserve. Sito was not the type to waste money, but if necessary, it wasn't a big deal for her, and this was a large amount she couldn't keep confidential, so she had her accountants deal with it. Kariko was practically about to have a stroke. "This is too much money. It's just the amount my information division deemed appropriate for the number of space pirate arrests we owe to Sena combined with the bounties for each of the pirates he captured." Kariko lost her breath. Then she did the math. "Isn't it a bit low for that? Okay, then I'll raise the incentive paid to Sena by 2 more digits. Does this look okay, Kariko-chan?" Sito transferred exponentially more. shocking Kariko. After further consideration, we have also factored in the anticipated damage amount caused by the space pirates captured and time and money saved from the lack of their influence and the damage they would have caused. In addition to the profits resulting from the rise in stock prices due to the stabilization of the economy due to Sena eliminating so much of the pirate population all at once. It was an astronomical figure. Kariko thought that Sito must have also collected contributions from other nations and big companies. It was like giving a child an allowance equal to a full nation's reserves. Well, as for the incentives paid by the GP and the Federation, those will be put in Jurai's treasury for the time being, but I'm thinking about making up for that at a later time. No one knew what Sito was actually going to do with that money while it was there. Sena will have no idea what to do with all this money, Kariko said. That's why I asked you to manage it. I know you don't like the idea of Sena being a member of the GP, but keep in mind, this is how much he is worth to us. Kariko knew it was true, but she didn't want to admit it. Even if the amount was huge, it wasn't worth Sena's life to her. Just because Sena has received this money doesn't mean it comes with strings. He doesn't even really need to join the GP. This is for the work he has already done and is not dependent on what he does in the future. Even if this is the only thing he does for the GP, this will be more than enough for ensuring he is always taken good care if he returns to Earth. His medical needs will always be met. Kariko realized Sito was right. Kariko thought about what would happen if Sena was taken advantage of by someone bad or a gold-digging woman. She realized with his luck that would be incredibly likely. So, she accepted that she had no choice but to manage it properly. She thought romantic thoughts about Sena and her as a couple, but she shook off those thoughts by thinking of her brother. Sito was enjoying watching how internally conflicted Kariko was as she agreed to manage Sena's money. A few hours after that, 1/1000th of the reward money was transferred to Sena's parents and Kariko informed them of his success. Sena was finally back at the entrance. He looked around at his surroundings to make sure they were safe. He had gotten his uniform covered in mud, but as he looked at his uniform it was doing something odd. The globs of mud quickly dried up and fell off like scabs, leaving it completely clean. He was amazed by this and at the fact that his outfit was just as clean and intact as before he went through his ordeal in the woods. It was much better than what they had on Earth. He purposely found some mud and put it on his shirt, and again it sucked up the moisture and the mud scabbed off. He was amazed. A person came behind him and asked the boy who was obsessed with his dirty uniform what he was doing in a stiff tone of voice. He was an elderly man. "Are you Sena Yamada?" "Yes, that's me." The man told him that it was quite late and asked what he was doing. Sena apologized and told him what had happened. The man told him that he had heard that Sena was prone to those kinds of situations. He was the administrator of the dormitory. He guided Sena to his dorm room. The man was also a life guidance teacher. He asked Sena why he came here and told him that stopping in the middle of the Animal Crossing area to test out his suit functions was practically the same as committing suicide. "I know it's your first time here, but you should still be on alert." It was a dangerous place even with Sito carefully keeping an eye on him. Sena noticed that it seemed that everyone he met already knew about that incident and his bad luck. He was embarrassed by that. Even the administrator seemed to know about the incident. "I'm sorry." He saw the scenery in the dorm and gasped at its beauty. The buildings that looked like ruins from afar seemed clearly maintained by humans from up close. There was a park nearby the dorms, with giant ancient trees arranged pleasantly in it. It also had cobblestone passages and waterways. Sena thought it was a bit different from the Mikagami's residential area, which was naturally arranged. This was clearly artificial. The administrator didn't fault Sena for getting lost in the scenery, but he didn't stop to explain it either. He kept walking. He walked by some other people and felt them staring at him. He had felt that a lot recently. Usually their stares felt hostile. The parts outside of the dorms were clearly well maintained through artificial means. Many mossy plants were rooted in the stone and colorful fragrant flowers were blooming. He noticed small cracks, but no major damage to the stones that made up the walls. He almost didn't notice the light fixtures above him that blended in with the flora. He found them pleasant. The administrator informed him that they had arrived at his room, room number 193. If you have any questions, you should ask your roommates, and remember that dorm life is also part of your training. Sena looked at the numbers on the door, room 193. He mulled over this in his head. Ichi without the top part of the chi looks like itsu. Su in Japanese can also elongate the consonant that it comes after, so he read it out loud to himself, or Ikkyu-san. This is the second time he had encountered this reference. He put his hand on his hair instinctively. He shook that feeling off and pressed the intercom. The door opened and confetti shot out and smoke and party poppers went off. Sena reflexively jumped. He wondered if one of the students who had given him the evil eye earlier was attacking him. But he soon realized that it was just confetti. His roommates, Kenneth the humanoid and Rijo the wow, greeted him. They were very glad to have the legendary capture of pirates as their roommate. Sena was stunned by their welcome. He noticed the other doors in the dorm were open and the people in them were staring out at him. Kenneth, an American-looking boy, asked him what was wrong and looked behind him. You guys aren't supposed to come out yet. That's right. We're still introducing ourselves. You're ruining our first impressions. All the doors closed and the faces disappeared. He told Sena to wait quietly for a moment. Behind Sena was a fenced-off area that led to a cliff, and a large number of boys were behind that fence. Sena was amazed they got up here. Their dorm was on the 5th floor. They had climbed up footholds in the cliff using the ivy growing on it. One of the boys put his face close to the fence and asked what kind of relationship Sena had with Amain. He felt their envy directed at him. Another one hopped over the fence and got up in Sena's face and asked about his relationship with Kariko. Like fish to bait, they jumped the fence and swarmed around him. Another one asked about Ryoko. The Amain faction and the Kariko faction started fighting and ignored Sena altogether. Come on, answer honestly. What kind of relationship do you have with Amain Konak? Sena understood Amain was a celebrity, but didn't understand why Kariko would be one. He scratched his head, puzzled at the scene of the boys fighting in front of him over their imaginary waifus. The ruckus drew the attention of a dorm administrator who yelled at them. They all quickly ran off and jumped over the fence and the cliff to go back to their rooms. Kenneth and Rijo pulled Sena to safety into their dorm room. Haha, you were saved thanks to the administrator. I guess sometimes that old man is actually useful for something. Sena was silent for a bit. He thought about the fanboys. Hey, when everyone ran, I thought I heard someone fall and screams from behind the fence, he said. One of his roommates said, it seems that some people have fallen. I am serious, Sena said. They laughed without worrying about the horrible facts. We're on the 5th floor, I have to help. He tried to run off, but they kept him from leaving. They told him to wait a moment. It was the administrator's job to deal with them. He was the only one qualified to help them. They introduced themselves. Was it really all right for us to not help them? One of the roommates asked him if the administrator told him about how dorm life was a part of training yet. He did mention that. Those 3 fanboys are roommates, and roommates are always supposed to act together as a team of sorts. Yeah, even if it is toilets, baths, or anything else that you can't tell people. But in the case of an emergency that the team can't deal with, it was the administrator's job to step in. Are the other teams usually enemies? It's not that extreme or personal enough to make enemies. His roommate told him that the Amain, Kariko, and Ryoko factions were in the same 3-person team, and he should just take care of himself. Well, for the most part though, we take care of ourselves if we can. Oh yeah, I wash my own pants and I can lick my own ass. Just wipe. Fine. I won't lick it. Sena then heard a telephone ring. They went further into the room. He got a barrage of calls all at once from the fanboys asking about their waifus. One of them wanted to hear about Amain and had the media on the line. Sena just assumed there wasn't such a thing in outer space because he hadn't seen anything like that since he had arrived. He decided to answer their questions and held a mini press conference. They asked him if he would like to take any questions from the viewers. Kenneth told them they would have to wait till later and hung up. Sena looked around the room for the first time since he was rushed into it. It was an ordinary modern room. There was a tatami mat and 3 desks and beds and an area where a table was placed. That's all he could see. His roommates told him his baggage and NB review unit had arrived. He thanked him. In the corner was a large box with the GP logo as well as a wooden box. His roommates were surprised. They had never seen an NB unit come in a wooden box before. Rajo stroked the box, impressed by it. He thought it looked like a luxury gift. They encouraged him to open it up soon, but Sena wanted to know what an NB unit was first. It is officially called a Non-Brain Judgment Research Unit. The GP's activities span all the Galactic Federation member countries, but the law differs slightly depending on countries and regions, and reforms are also frequently carried out. It is impossible for anyone to remember everything, so we use such artificial intelligence units as assistants. In some cases, a simple trial may be handled by this AI. If knowing such things is so important, why don't they make us learn them? Sena asked. Kenneth sarcastically replied, it's a non-brain unit, so you don't have to use your brain. Sena opened the box, his roommates wowed in awe. They were surprised at how small the one he was given was. It was totally different from the standard issue model. The spherical, pearl-like ball made Sena feel out of place. A unit with only a basic AI was good for most people when they started out. But as the range and difficulties of one's duties as a GP officer expanded, it tended to put out some good information, but also some information that was very seriously incorrect. They told him it made the most sense to use it as a personal assistant or mixed unit. Kenneth and Rajo carefully examined the spherical unit. Its basic design was not very different, but it appeared to be a prototype made by a small workshop or an undergraduate because it had no production barcode. Sena's from a primitive planet, so they probably had it custom-made. The pearly, shiny surface reminds me of the adult hardware that I ordered in your name, Kenneth said. Rajo was mad that he did that. He got embarrassed and said he would talk with Kenneth about it later. There was a famous character designer, sex doll maker, at the academy who had made a new form of biometal. Sena's NV seemed to be made of that. Kenneth described his robosex doll in way too much detail. Wait a moment. Kenneth got something out of his bed storage. It was a pair of weird novelty Groucho glasses. He asked Sena what he thought of them. Sena thought he looked strange. These glasses have a filter that will tell us if it's authentic. They asked Sena if there were also sex toys on Earth. He said yes. Kai bought one once, but it was a knockoff product that was pearly made. Well, I guess that's common everywhere. When blood goes to the lower part of the body, judgment is lowered, Rajo said. Sena nodded. Kenneth said they were being rude and that there was no way it was a fake. Kenneth downloaded software to put a filter on the glasses from the developer online to check for its authenticity. Shortly after, he came to the conclusion that it was real, and so the NB unit wasn't a prototype, at least not for commercial purposes, but it seemed like a military-grade model. They wondered why they would send something that should be classified like that to a place like their dorm. Sena asked what biometal was. It was mineral matter with biological functions. It had a pearl luster and a fine texture, and it could grow. It was the ideal building material for special hobbyists to grow perverted abomination women. He asked why they would be using it on his NB. They suggested that maybe it was so it could repair itself. Or maybe it transformed into a cute girl. This conversation went on for a while. Much too long of a while. It seemed the next release by the scientist was delayed, and Sena had also gotten a pair of glasses with his NB unit. The issue was resolved though, so they moved on to showing Sena his room. The desk had storage in it. Under the bed was also storage and had a force field if they wanted to concentrate or if they preferred it be quiet when they slept. Kenneth demonstrated. Sena touched the force plate. However, when Sena touched the plate, it malfunctioned. Suddenly the force field was released, and Kenneth was exposed under it. He pulled up his pants in a panic, embarrassed. Rajo asked what he was doing in there. He had been mooning them from the inside. They showed him the washroom. He remembered seeing units like it in the GP ship. It looked the same. He was shown the nano-machine shower. There was no bath. Sena was told they had public baths if he wanted to use one, but the nanomachines could clean him with his clothes on. He got inside. His hand brushed a panel. They got locked in and the box vibrated strangely. It was set to laundry mode. Rajo rushed to turn it off. Inside were a dizzy Sena and Kenneth. The box also worked as a laundry machine, it seemed. Sena dried off nearly instantly. They explained it used nanomachines which dried in only 10 seconds. He was then shown their door's personal authentication system. It registered his genetic code. Then it broke. They reported it to the administrator, who replaced the door, but they had to use military-grade explosives to get it off. When they got back in their dorm, Sena told them it was all his fault and told them all about his bad luck. He said he would understand if they changed rooms to avoid his bad luck. But his roommates thought it was an interesting talent and laughed. They accepted him. Sena was relieved. Sito said he would be welcomed, but he hadn't believed her till then. Sena's luck is just like the Kuramitsu's, don't you think? Like Mitoto? What do you know about her? She was on the ship with me. It seemed Mitoto had a reputation for going missing when she cleaned, and she ended up in ridiculous places more and more these days. It even happened to those who cleaned with her. She had been the cause of many ghost stories. Sena realized this was actually the reason Ananan stopped her from cleaning the ship. He didn't want her disappearing. Such a probability bias seemed to run in the Kuramitsu family. He was told that he should be careful. There were many hobbyists who gathered strange people in this galaxy and turned them into research subjects. Then they got hungry and ordered meals from the screen on the table that appeared. They could choose what they wanted to eat for now because their meal plan hadn't yet been customized to their dietary needs, but usually it was automated. His roommates demonstrated how to order something. There was a lip sign on the menu. He asked what it did. It gave a virtual simulation tasting of the dish. He tested it out and it gave him some sauce. He tasted it. It was good. Virtual simulations were potentially dangerous, but this was the one place they were still allowed. He wondered how much the food was. There was no price on the menu. He realized he had no money. He was told by his roommates, though, that it was free, but everything else he used, like the payphone, just charged to his GP account by scanning his biometrics. He was told he would start getting paid a salary once practical training began. They told him to put his hand on a certain part of the screen so they could check his balance. They saw the massive amount of money in his account and freaked out. Are you from a rich family? What does your family do for a living? They sell meat? They accused him of being from a family of poachers. Then they decided that night's big splurge was on Sena. He asked them how much money his balance was in terms of how long he could live off of it. They told him if he lived a normal life, he could last a whole year off the amount. He was surprised. He was convinced they were right about his parents being poachers. Their dishes came in. 3 came in and then it didn't stop. They were flooded with dishes. They wondered how Sena had done this and how they were going to eat all the food.